This is Ambition Today. On this episode, we are joined by Dr. Dileep Rao. He is the author of Nothing Ventured, Everything Gained, a book that helps the 99% who will not get venture capital, the 80% who fail with venture capital money, and the rest who can control the venture and the wealth created by delaying that investment. This is Ambition Today.
These are the entrepreneurs, creators, investors, and builders who ambitiously change to the world. Explore the hardships and heroisms of everyday life while we reveal the key moments to leave behind a lasting legacy. This is Ambition Today with Kevin Siskar.
What's up, world? I am Kevin Siskar, and you are listening to Ambition Today. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast in your favorite podcast app. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, SoundCloud, really anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Big news, for as little as $3, you can now join the Ambition Today back channel. That's a collection of all the favorite fans of the show, sharing what's working in the community, and then also you get to hear the single greatest piece of advice each guest has ever received. Some amazing content, some deeply powerful insights, and you can join now for as little as $3 a month at siskar.co/A-list. In case you missed it, last episode we talked to Greg Alterman. He's the founder of MF People, which is aiming to make life simpler by thoughtfully creating best-in-class, gender-neutral, everyday products. And he previously sold his last company to Haynes for almost $100 million. But today I'm excited. We're joined by Dr. Dileep Rao. He's the author of Nothing Ventured, Everything Gained, a book to help those who don't get venture capital, those who fail with it, and really helping founders optimize how to get the most wealth out of the startup that they created. So, Dr. Dileep, thank you for joining us on the show today. Where are you calling from?
My pleasure. I'm calling from Silicon Valley right now in Palo Alto.
Nice.
And I had a speech here yesterday and a speech here this afternoon.
Well, we appreciate it, and thank you for taking a little bit of time to share your story with us today. So let's take it back to the beginning. Tell us a bit about where and how you grew up.
Okay, well, let me start way after the twinkle in my father's eye. Essentially, I came to this country to get my education. And while I was finishing my PhD, I needed a summer job, got a job at a venture capital firm. At the end of the summer, basically at that time it was a leveraged buyout firm, and they had purchased some companies.
And what year is this?
1973.
Okay, so this is like the birth of venture capital. People are still kind of trying to figure out what it is.
The birth of venture capital is 1946. The teenage years of venture capital was 1958 when you had the SBIC law passed. And the adulthood of venture capital was 1978 when you had the ERISA law passed, and that created the LPs. So I kind of was 5 years before the LPs were started, and so I could see the transition. But I joined this firm for the summer. It's a leveraged buyout firm. By the end of the summer, I was made vice president. And so for the next 2 or 3 years, we bought companies, turned them around. We purchased 5, turned 4 of them around, and decided turnarounds was there were many issues that were wrong with it. Mainly they were depressive. And so went into venture capital. And at that time, Minnesota, Wisconsin were among the top 3. As venture capital moved west and Silicon Valley became the sole area where it did extremely well, Minnesota, Wisconsin faded. So we went into other things, leasing, owning real estate. We were huge in industrial real estate and lending. So by the time I quit, basically we had funded about over 400 companies in all kinds of financing. I had written 2 books, one for the New York Times, one for the American Management Association. And I thought it was time to do something else. So I became a consultant to the U.S. government and started working with low-income areas in this country on how to improve the local economy by helping the entrepreneurs.
Nice.
And a few years later, I started teaching, and that led me to this phase of my journey.
Awesome. Well, that's amazing. Were there any influences early on? I know you mentioned your father. Were there any influences, that in hindsight, looking back, were inherently entrepreneurial that kind of, maybe led you towards, being attracted to that sort of industry?
I think it was this summer job that I got, and I saw how much fun it was. My family in India has been in business and finance on one side, on my mother's side, and my father's side, they were all professionals. So it kind of showed me how you can balance both and do it. And the job was fun. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I kind of learned into it and realized that I had good skill sets to turn around businesses. So I'm a born skeptic, and I like numbers. And so we were able to turn them around and then bring in the right people to make them grow, or we sold them. So it was a little lucky that I found the right thing at the right time for me, and made the best of it.
Yeah, well, that's life. How you mentioned numbers in there. How important do you think it is to be really good with numbers, spreadsheets, to be an investor, play in the world of venture capital?
Well, we grew tremendously in our fund, primarily by teaching entrepreneurs who knew how to sell. We taught them numbers. I was teaching them financial statements. I was teaching them how to interpret their financial statements to see what they could do in their business. One of the biggest things I found, and the biggest fallacy in entrepreneurship, is you can run a business without numbers, that you can just sell your way to success. And what I found is that if you knew your numbers, you could pick the right strategy, you could go into the right investments and spend the money wisely and make more money. And that is actually the simplest thing. I've not been able to teach people how to sell. I know there are plenty of books and all kinds of gurus, but that is, to me, the toughest thing to teach a Sheldon how to sell. And Sheldon from Big Bang.
Yeah.
As opposed to, it's much easier to teach anyone how to manage their business with numbers. So I think I just lucked on to the right strategy for us, and it has been very good for me.
Yeah. So, I see this all the time with founders. You have someone coming off Wall Street that is really numbers oriented, right? Then you have, maybe an engineer or a graphic designer or someone that is kind of scared of spreadsheets or, afraid to dive in, or they just get immediately overwhelmed by it, right? So but they're still founding a company, right? They're just coming at it from a different angle. So what advice would you have to someone that needs to, figure out their financials, but is maybe overwhelmed or hasn't done it before, or doesn't have that numbers background? Where should they start if they're listening right now?
Well, first of all, I think the two examples you gave, they are the ones who find numbers the easiest. They understand financial statements the easiest. I'm an ex-engineer. I have 2 engineering degrees, but like many Indians in this country, of my generation. But the trouble with translating the numbers that you learn in engineering to business is that in engineering, these numbers have more of a scientific basis or more of a technology basis. In business, it's very amorphous because you basically don't know the future, and that's where you're going to live. And all the numbers are made up about the future. And so what engineers can't get their hands around is that, hey, these financial projections are all amorphous. They're all inaccurate. The trouble, so I found it easier once they accepted that projections are all imaginary, and you need to monitor them. That's the reason to do it, not because they're accurate, but because it helps you monitor where you're going. It's easier. The problem is the other group. The other group are those who know how to sell. And the ones who know how to sell, the ones who are good with people, they often, and I think the American school system ought to be penalized heavily, but they have a mortal fear of numbers. It's like 2 times 2 is about as high as they are comfortable with. And if they became more comfortable with numbers, I think they do excellent. And so what we would teach them is, A, what are the basic financial statements? How do you come up with it? How do they link each other? The second part is, how do they link to the business? In essence, what does this number tell you about the business? We turn around companies because I happen to have an instinctive liking for that. I could look at gross margins, see what was happening to that, and figure out where the problem was in the business. You can teach that. You can see sales growing, this is the issues. Sales falling, these are the issues. Sales stagnant, link everything together. And then the third part is a tough part. So what do you do with it? And this is where I'm kind of going now. But the training part, I've been evolving, but to me, most business schools have been teaching the wrong things.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, that's super helpful. I know that over your career, you've invested in somewhere around 450 businesses. Can you tell us a little bit, from sitting on the other side of the table, right, being an investor, what are some of the biggest takeaways over that career? Obviously, I know it's vast, but if you could just pick one or two lessons that you've learned that could maybe be helpful to founders, what would they be?
Well, I think the first thing is that you cannot predict the future. That's the first lesson that I learned as a financier, because I don't like risk, and I do everything I can to reduce risk. And the partner I worked with loved risk. I mean, he was a born risk taker. So we made a great pair. We'd fight like cats and dogs with each other about every deal. But his goal was to make the deal. My goal was to cut the risk. And so at the end of the day, we would figure it out. But the key issue there is, how do you take those numbers and make it work for your business? So those are the skills that you need to teach. And that's a takeaway I got from this. Teach people how to reduce risk. And we reduced our own risk. We went into anything once. If it worked, we would do more. If it didn't, we would back off. And so that was basically the arrangement we came with. So it taught me how to cut risk. And that's the biggest takeaway I would take from that. Even entrepreneurs. People talk about being a phoenix and failing and coming back. There's not much fun about failing. In Silicon Valley, it's accepted more than anywhere else. But in the rest of the country, I've seen people who failed once. And somebody says, oh, that John, is that the guy who failed 25 years ago? I mean, they remember who failed 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So you can't generalize. What happens in Silicon Valley doesn't happen elsewhere in the country.
So you mentioned there that, you guys would try anything once, and then if it worked, you would do more. If it didn't work, you would do less. I can imagine over a career of, 20, 30, 40 years, that creates a lot of rules, principles, right? Mm-hmm. Was there ever a time that you felt that you should have violated one of those rules, made an exception, right? I guess how do you not end up with this code of laws and know when to trust your gut in comparison to that?
Well, I think the first point on the rules is that if you're going to reduce risk, you need to understand the stage. So the first thing is, what stage of the venture are you at? And this is where I've come up with my 4 ahas. And the 4 ahas are: A, the opportunity aha. Is your opportunity like a cure for cancer? If it's a cure for cancer, you know what? There'll be people lined up all the way from your door till the end of the universe wanting to finance and invest in your business if you have a cure for cancer. But how many of us know how to cure cancer? So we come up with an app. Can that app be easily imitated? Yes. Steve Jobs was a master of imitation. So if somebody else can imitate it, just coming up with a new app doesn't mean anything. You need to implement it, which comes to the next one, and that's a strategy aha. Can you come up with a great strategy? This is like Sam Walton. We funded 3 of his stores when he was expanding through Wisconsin. And he had a terrific strategy. He would circumvent all urban areas because he didn't want to compete against Kmart and Target, and just went into rural areas. And that's what taught me the discipline, that you need to stick to what works for you. And he was a master at it. And so that's the second part. Your strategy works, great. Third is the toughest part. And this is the entrepreneur aha, the leadership aha. Are you terrific? Are you the next Mark Zuckerberg? Are you the next Bill Gates? Are you the next Steve Jobs? If you can prove that, the next Elon Musk, people will throw money at you. And so raising money when you have neither one of these is you're going around with a begging bowl saying, please give me money. Once you've passed these ahas, then you sit on the throne and let them come and kiss your ring, and they will fund you. It happened with Jan Koum. The 4th aha is the repeat entrepreneur aha. Once you've built a great business, if you want to build your next business, everybody wants to fund you. So get to that and people will fund you. So funding is not the key issue. Which aha have you reached? Just asking for money. There are always more people seeking money than there are people willing to invest. What makes you separated from the rest of the people? So first is understand that. And the second is more important, I think. And that is understand the strategies and the skill sets you need personally to get to the promised land. What is it you need to know? What is it you need to do? Because you only grow as much as your skills and your strategies. Many people say, I need to monitor everything about my business and be there. Well, if you want to be there, you have one store. That's about it. But if you are comfortable monitoring empire and training people, that's what the billion-dollar entrepreneurs did. They were able to monitor, they were able to organize, they were able to lead, they were able to build leaders. And all of a sudden, they could now manage an empire. So you grow only as much as your skill sets and your expertise. That's what I was trying to figure out, where they fit and how to fund them.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I teach a course on founder productivity. I actually just gave the talk on Tuesday night. And it's always amazing because you could tell some people in the crowd who are clearly, better on the block a little bit are like, oh yeah, no, I get this. And then there's always a few people in the crowd who are just kind of starting out, haven't really built their business yet. And they're like, oh, but I just need investors. I just need money. It's like, no, you need to do a lot of self-work to be able to do all this. I love that you independently hit on that as well. So let's take a quick break. We're here with Dr. Dileep Rao talking about his new book, which we will be talking more about right after this break.
This is Ambition Today.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Ambition Today. Don't forget to join the back channel, the Ambition Today A-list, to get the single greatest piece of advice Dileep has ever received. The price is super founder friendly, starting at just $3. That's syscar.co/A-list to join the show's back channel today. Ambition Today is also happy to partner with Founder Institute, the world's premier launch stage accelerator. With over 3,000 technology companies graduated across 6 continents, the Founder Institute has learned a ton. And we've used all that data to compile the best personality traits of successful founders. These are things such as fluid intelligence, openness, conscientiousness, and more. And if you think you might have that entrepreneurial DNA and want to find out, then you can visit fi.co/join/ambition to apply, take the test, and get your scores today. Ambition Today is also happy to partner with Audible. Visit audibletrial.com/ambition today to download and keep any audiobook for free. The book I'm listening to on Audible right now is Flash Boys. It's amazing. Historical look at what happened in the stock market over the last 7-8 years, especially with high frequency trading. Really, really interesting. Definitely check it out. And you can listen for free if you go to audibletrial.com/ambition today to download right now. And now back to this amazing episode of Ambition Today.
Visit Ambition Today online at syscar.co and follow the show on social media at Ambition Today.
Welcome back. We are here with Dr. Dileep Rao and talking about his new book, Nothing Ventured, Everything Gained. So Nothing Ventured, Everything Gained has just been released, I believe, last month. Tell us a little bit about this book, why you wrote it, and what it is.
Well, why I wrote it is it happens to be the next step in what I've been doing. I started teaching and I started inviting, and the school helped me, in inviting some of Minnesota's greatest entrepreneurs. And I started teaching in Minnesota, where I live. And Minnesota has the highest per capita number of billion-dollar entrepreneurs in the country. There's something in the water there. When I asked some of these people, they said it's too damn cold. You can't do anything else but work. So, but there's something unique there. And so I used to invite some of these people to my classes. And there's a guy called Bob Kirlin, who is one of the nicest and best entrepreneurs I've met. And he built a company called Fastenal. And Fastenal is one of the best unheralded companies in this country and sells nuts and bolts. And he built a multi-billion-dollar business. And I kept wondering, how do you build a multi-billion-dollar business selling nuts and bolts when everybody else is talking about patents and apps and, and he was selling nuts and bolts. Anyone could sell it. And so I kept asking him. And in the third year, he basically said, we had great people. And at that time, I remembered a problem, which is lions led by sheep will lose to sheep led by a lion. All of a sudden, I said, what does this guy have? What makes him a lion that has made him so good? So I started looking at who else in Minnesota has built huge businesses. and started interviewing all of them. And that's when my last book came out called Bootstrap to Billions. And then I looked at the patterns. How did they evolve? I found 7 steps. And the 7 steps are A, finding the right opportunity. 2, developing the right strategy. 3, finding the right financing. And this is financing where you keep control of the business. You don't give up control. That is one rule at this time. Never lose control, no matter who is coming and giving you a gold star. 4th, how do you launch your business with limited capital? This is tough because this is taking off in real time with limited fuel and limited runway. And can you do that? This is where most people fail. Once you've taken off, then how do you control the business? If you don't know what you're controlling, you're going to run into a wall. 5th, how do you organize? Because if you can't organize people and motivate them, you're basically going to be a small business. And 7th and toughest, how do you become a great leader? So I started looking at this and then wrote the first book, which is Nothing Ventured, Everything Gained. And that is, how do you find the right opportunity and the right strategy?
I love it.
So the next book is, how do you finance it?
Awesome. So I love it. Actually, I really like that idea that you found these entrepreneurs that literally anybody could sell nuts and bolts, to your point, and they built $1 billion businesses, right? And so, what is the difference between them and everyone else? I think you're like a scientist when it comes to dissecting that, which is great. What else can founders expect to learn by grabbing this book?
Well, what they can expect to learn is, A, whether they are in business today or whether they are a new entrepreneur, no matter what stage they are, if they're looking to grow, and that is a big if, because there are many people who are totally comfortable with life. They're where they are, hallelujah.
Yep.
But there are some people who want to grow. If they want to grow, what this book shows them is where are the growth opportunities? Where should they focus their efforts to get to the next level? You know, people say, oh, I can look around. I want to sell a Norwegian taco. Well, great. But what I found is that about 96% of the entrepreneurs that I was interviewing grew with a trend, grew with an emerging trend. And if you look at Steve Ells, he found in Chipotle, he found the emerging trend of organic food. Same with Whole Foods. Bill Gates, PCs, Mark Zuckerberg, online. So they found an emerging trend and jumped on that emerging trend. That is a single best piece of advice I figured out on this, that if you want to grow, get there. If you're an entrepreneur, get there. Passion is good. Vision is good. But what is the trend, and do you have the skills in that trend? If you don't have the skills, learn them.
Yeah.
If you are doing something else, pivot and figure out. And then the second, which is tough, that's a strategy part. How do you find the fulcrum of the trend? Now, what does that mean? That means, how do you find the key thing that helps you dominate that trend? Because if you don't dominate, somebody else dominates. And if somebody else dominates, they kill you. So how do you dominate that trend? How do you find the fulcrum? This is like Travis Kalanick, basically switching Uber from limo rental to letting anyone drive their car. That's a pivot, but that's a visioning to say the fulcrum is we let anyone drive their car. And then everybody said sharing economy. People have to come up with all these terms. But the key difficult part, well, that's how you live as a journalist. But the key difficult part was him revisioning to find the fulcrum. Steve Jobs finding in the iPod a way to sell music and make it so sexy that everybody wanted to have it. How do you find that fulcrum? That's the key part. That's a strategic part that these people did.
Yeah, I love that. Where do you see the future of venture capital going next? You've been in the space for a while. Where do you see it in 2025, the next wave? It feels like we're at the end of the mobile wave, right? And something is about to come next, and people are kind of searching, grasping. They don't really know. VCs are kind of unsure of where to put their money, what this next wave is going to be that they can, other investments can ride, right? Where do you see the future of venture capital going? I guess 2 ways, both from like an investment side, like where are they going to put the money? And then also I'm curious your opinion on where do you see venture capital going as its own industry? Like, is software going to eat it? Is data going to take over? So 2 questions there.
Actually, I was going to give those 2 answers because this is what I talked about yesterday afternoon at Draper University here. But from the perspective of VCs, if you look at the history of VC, essentially this wave has been in force since 1978. And that's when the ERISA law passed and the VC LP started dominating and Silicon Valley took over as the center of the universe. And it's now 40 years old. And I think it's long in the tooth and it has become so specialized that only about, some people think 15 VCs, some people think 50 VCs, all in Silicon Valley are in the top. So it's become so specialized that nobody else is doing it. So they have to find a new strategy. That's from the VC side. As far as where they invest, what they have done throughout history is always find great deals in emerging industries and emerging technologies and emerging trends. That's where the deals have been. So let me answer that first. Where are the emerging trends, technology, and so forth? With the caveat that the only people who forecast accurately, which means totally incorrectly, are American economists and Indian astrologers. And I'm neither one of them. Okay? So this is my assumption and all due to be wrong. But I look at it, I call it Internet 3.0. And Internet 3.0, other than these great discoveries in brain science, which my son is trying to do, or in other areas. But Internet 3.0 is happening right now. And that is, Internet 1.0 was the formation of the Internet in 95. Internet 2.0 was LinkedIn, Facebook, where it was look at me kind of thing. And now we have where the Internet is affecting real industries. Uber was at the forefront. But it's affecting everything. It's affecting online education, affecting medicine, affecting manufacturing. And that is where I see fantastic opportunities from the perspective of entrepreneurs, other than the medical discoveries. But from the other side, from the VC side, I think it's even more fascinating. VCs have put themselves into a corner in such a small market with so many few deals, just because they have made this assumption that they can look at deals and say, this one will succeed. And the trouble is, if they could do that, why are they failing on 80% of the deals? Steve Jobs was turned down by about 12 VCs, 10 or 12. The Google duo were turned down by about 13 VCs. These are brilliant entrepreneurs. They had fantastic companies. People looked into their eyes and said, no. So we can't look at people's eyes. All we can do is do the Mark Zuckerberg strategy. He was growing at such a fantastic pace with so many new users that it was an idiot could invest in that and make money. You basically could say, this is a company that's growing, let's fund this. They had proof. They had aha. You knew he was growing. Jan Koum, same thing, had 250, 300 million users for WhatsApp. Was a no-brainer to fund it. So how can we get to that? That is a key point. And so now if you look at it, there are 2 ways, broad ways of finding deals. One is great opportunities. This is, I can look at this opportunity in this app and see if it'll work. No, you can't. Unless, of course, it's a cure for cancer. That's why I keep using that today. The second is the entrepreneur, the skills. You can't look at people's eyes. But what you can do is what I call the bottom-up strategy. Teach everyone. That's why I'm going online. I'm forming an online institute to basically teach the world and teach everyone who has a motivation, the desire. These are the skills. These are the strategies. This is how you can learn the skills. We can even teach some of them to you. These are the strategies you use. Go forth and multiply. And let's see who comes out of the ooze and who succeeds. And when they start growing, say, aha, that's who we should fund. And if you look at history and the numbers, VCs can increase their market tremendously by saying, look, we can't look at opportunities and all these pitch contests are basically garbage. We need to tell you, go and do it. Let's see if you have the motivation. If you're a fair weather entrepreneur who basically says, you know what, I'll start my business if I can get $1 million. Otherwise, I'm going to go and join an investment bank. Then go and join an investment bank. but let's teach everyone. Let's see who comes out of the mass and then reward them. That, I think, will multiply. So this is a marriage of the old venture capital with entrepreneur-based. And I think it's the next wave, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I'm really curious to see where this industry goes. And yeah, well, we will definitely see. Great. Well, Dileep, I want to thank you for taking the time. If you're out there listening, check out the Ambition Today back channel. We're going to move now over there to hear the single greatest piece of advice Dileep's ever received. Syskar.co/A-list to keep listening. As always, the show notes, which include everything from this episode, links, everything we talked about, are all going to be up on Syskar.co. Dileep, thank you again for coming on the pod. Where can people go find out more about you? And is there anywhere else they should be checking out? Where can they grab your book?
They can grab my book at my website, dileeprao.com. It's DIL, 2 E's and a P. And the last name is RAO.com. Or they can go to Amazon. They can find it there. Either one is fine. And if they want to learn more about me, again, if they go to my website, they have a link there where they can send me a question, and I'd be glad to connect. I don't fund any more companies, so don't send me, can you invest in my company? Nor do I look at deals, but I'd be glad to connect.
Yeah, definitely. And, I love when people do that. My own website, people can contact me. And you get all these other messages on LinkedIn and everywhere. It's like literally people can just shoot me an email and get direct contact. So I love that you make yourself that accessible to the founders. So amazing. Well, stay curious, everyone. And we will see some of you on the back channel, but we'll see the rest of you on the next episode of Ambition Today.
Thanks for listening to Ambition Today. Be sure to visit Syskar.co to get all the information from this episode and more great content. Until next time, stay curious, everyone.